The Karnak Temple Complex, commonly known as Karnak, comprises a vast mix of decayed temples, chapels, pylons, and other buildings near Luxor, Egypt. Construction at the complex began during the reign of Senusret I in the Middle Kingdom and continued into the Ptolemaic Kingdom, although most of the extant buildings date from the New Kingdom. The area around Karnak was the ancient Egyptian Ipet Iset and the main place of worship of the 18th dynastic Theban triad, with the god Amun as its head. It is part of the monumental city of Thebes. The Karnak complex gives its name to the nearby, and partly surrounded, modern village of El Karnak, 2.5 kilometers north of Luxor. Overview. The complex is a vast open site and includes the Karnak Open Air Museum. It is believed to be the second most visited historical site in Egypt. Only the Giza Pyramid complex near Cairo receives more visits. It consists of 4 main parts, of which only the largest is currently open to the general public. The term Karnak often is understood as being the precinct of Amun-Re only, because this is the only part most visitors see. The 3 other parts, the precinct of Mut, the precinct of Montu, and the dismantled temple of Amenhotep IV, are closed to the public. There also are a few smaller temples and sanctuaries connecting the precinct of Mut, the precinct of Amun-Re, and the Luxor temple. The precinct of Mut is very ancient, being dedicated to an earth and creation deity, but not yet restored. The original temple was destroyed and partially restored by Hatshepsut, although another pharaoh built around it in order to change the focus or orientation of the sacred area. Many portions of it may have been carried away for use in other buildings. The key difference between Karnak and most of the other temples and sites in Egypt is the length of time over which it was developed and used. Construction of temples started in the Middle Kingdom and continued into Ptolemaic times. Approximately 30 pharaohs contributed to the buildings, enabling it to reach a size, complexity, and diversity not seen elsewhere. Few of the individual features of Karnak are unique, but the size and number of features are overwhelming. The deities represented range from some of the earliest worship to those worshipped much later in the history of the ancient Egyptian culture. Although destroyed, it also contained an early temple built by Amenhotep IV, the pharaoh who later would celebrate a near monotheistic religion he established that prompted him to move his court and religious center away from Thebes. It also contains evidence of adaptations, where the buildings of the ancient Egyptians were used by later cultures for their own religious purposes. One famous aspect of Karnak is the Great Hypostyle Hall in the precinct of Amun-Re, a hall area of 50,000 square feet with 134 massive columns arranged in 16 rows. 122 of these columns are 10 meters tall, and the other 12 are 21 meters tall with a diameter of over 3 meters. The architraves on top of these columns are estimated to weigh 70 tons. These architraves may have been lifted to these heights using levers. This would be an extremely time-consuming process and also would require great balance to get to such great heights. A common alternative theory regarding how they were moved is that large ramps were constructed of sand, mud, brick or stone and that the stones were then towed up the ramps. If stone had been used for the ramps, they would have been able to use much less material. The top of the ramps presumably would have employed either wooden tracks or cobblestones for towing the megaliths. There is an unfinished pillar in an out-of-the-way location that indicates how it would have been finished. Final carving was executed after the drums were put in place so that it was not damaged while being placed. Several experiments moving megaliths with ancient technology were made at other locations, some of them are listed here. In 2009, UCLA launched a website dedicated to virtual reality digital reconstructions of the Karnak complex and other resources. The sun god's shrine has light focused upon it during the winter solstice. History. The history of the Karnak complex is largely the history of Thebes and its changing role in the culture. Religious centers varied by region, and when a new capital of the unified culture was established, the religious centers in that area gained prominence. The city of Thebes does not appear to have been of great significance before the 11th dynasty, and previous temple building there would have been relatively small, with shrines being dedicated to the early deities of Thebes, the earth goddess Mut and Montu. Early building was destroyed by invaders. The earliest known artifact found in the area of the temple is a small, 8-sided column from the 11th dynasty, which mentions Amun-Re. Amun was long the local tutelary deity of Thebes. He was identified with the ram and the goose. The Egyptian meaning of Amun is hidden or the hidden god. Major construction work in the precinct of Amun-Re took place during the 18th dynasty, when Thebes became the capital of the unified ancient Egypt. Almost every pharaoh of that dynasty added something to the temple site. Thutmose I erected an enclosure wall connecting the fourth and fifth pylons, which comprise the earliest part of the temple still standing in situ. Hatshepsut had monuments constructed and also restored the original precinct of Mut, that had been ravaged by the foreign rulers during the Hyksos occupation. She had twin obelisks, at the time the tallest in the world, erected at the entrance to the temple. One still stands, as the tallest surviving ancient obelisk on Earth, the other has broken in two and toppled. Another of her projects at the site, Karnak's Red Chapel or Chapelle Rouge, was intended as a bark shrine and originally may have stood between her two obelisks. She later ordered the construction of two more obelisks to celebrate her 16th year as pharaoh. One of the obelisks broke during construction, and thus, a third was constructed to replace it. The broken obelisk was left at its quarrying site in Aswan, where it still remains. Known as the unfinished obelisk, it provides evidence of how obelisks were quarried. Construction of the Great Hypostyle Hall also may have begun during the 18th dynasty. Merneptah, also of the 19th dynasty, commemorated his victories over the Sea peoples on the walls of the Kashet court, the start of the processional route to the Luxor temple. The last major change to the precinct of Amun-Re's layout was the addition of the first pylon and the massive enclosure walls that surround the whole precinct, both constructed by Nectanebo I of the 30th dynasty. In 323 AD, Roman Emperor Constantine the Great recognized the Christian religion, and in 356 Constantius II ordered the closing of pagan temples throughout the Roman Empire, into which Egypt had been annexed in 30 BC. Karnak was by this time mostly abandoned, and Christian churches were founded among the ruins. The most famous example of this is the reuse of the festival hall of Thutmose III's central hall, where painted decorations of saints and Coptic inscriptions can still be seen. European knowledge of Karnak. Thebes' exact placement was unknown in medieval Europe, though both Herodotus and Strabo give the exact location of Thebes and how long up the Nile one must travel to reach it. Maps of Egypt, based on the 2nd century Claudius Ptolemaeus' mammoth work Geographia, had been circulating in Europe since the late 14th century, all of them showing Thebes' location. Despite this, several European authors of the 15th and 16th centuries who visited only Lower Egypt and published their travel accounts, such as Jos van Gestel and André the Vet, put Thebes in or close to Memphis. The Karnak temple complex is first described by an unknown Venetian in 1589, although his account gives no name for the complex. This account, housed in the Biblioteca Nazionale Centrale di Firenze, is the first known European mention, since ancient Greek and Roman writers, about a whole range of monuments in Upper Egypt and Nubia, including Karnak, Luxor Temple, the Colossi of Memnon, Esna, Edfu, Kamombo, Philae, and others. Karnak as a village name, and name of the complex, is first attested in 1668, when two Capuchin missionary brothers, Protais and Charles-François d'Orléans, traveled through the area. Protais' writing about their travel was published by Melchizedek Thévenot and Johann Michael van Sleb. The first drawing of Karnak is found in Paul Lucas' travel account of 1704. It is rather inaccurate, and can be quite confusing to modern eyes. Lucas traveled in Egypt during 1699 to 1703. The drawing shows a mixture of the precinct of Amun-Re and the precinct of Montu, based on a complex confined by the three huge Ptolemaic gateways of Ptolemy III Euergetes, Ptolemy IV Philopator, and the massive 113 meters long, 43 meters high and 15 meters thick, first pylon of the precinct of Amun-Re. Karnak was visited and described in succession by Claude Sicard and his travel companion Pierre Laurent Pincia, Granger, Frederick Louis Norden, Richard Bacach, James Bruce, Charles Nicolas Sigisbert Sonini de Mononcourt, William George Brown, and finally by a number of scientists of the Napoleon expedition, including Vivant Denon, during 1798 to 1799. Claude-Étienne Savary describes the complex in rather great detail in his work of 1785, especially in light of the fact that it is a fictional account of a pretend journey to Upper Egypt, composed out of information from other travelers. Savary did visit Lower Egypt in 1777-78, and published a work about that too. Main parts. Precinct of Amun-Re. This is the largest of the precincts of the temple complex, and is dedicated to Amun-Re, the chief deity of the Theban triad. There are several colossal statues, including the figure of Pinijamai, which is 10.5 meters tall. The sandstone for this temple, including all of the columns, was transported from Gabal Silsila 100 miles south on the Nile River. It also has one of the largest obelisks, weighing 328 tons and standing 29 meters tall, precinct of Mut. Located to the south of the newer Amen-Re complex, this precinct was dedicated to the mother goddess, Mut, who became identified as the wife of Amun-Re in the 18th dynasty Theban triad. It has several smaller temples associated with it and has its own sacred lake, constructed in a crescent shape. This temple has been ravaged, many portions having been used in other structures. Following excavation and restoration works by the Johns Hopkins University team, led by Betsy Bryan, the precinct of Mut has been open to the public. 600 black granite statues were found in the courtyard to her temple. It may be the oldest portion of the site. In 2006, Betsy Bryan presented her findings of one festival that included apparent intentional overindulgence in alcohol. Participation in the festival was great, including the priestesses and the population. Historical records of tens of thousands attending the festival exist. These findings were made in the Temple of Mut because when Thebes rose to greater prominence, Mut absorbed the warrior goddesses, Sekhmet and Bast, as some of her aspects. First, Mut became Mut Wajet Bast, then Mut Sekhmet Bast, then Mut also assimilated Menhit, another lioness goddess, and her adopted son's wife, becoming Mut Sekhmet Bast Menhit, and finally becoming Mut Nekbet. Temple excavations at Luxor discovered a porch of drunkenness built onto the temple by the pharaoh Hatshepsut, during the height of her 20-year reign. In a later myth developed around the annual Drunken Sekhmet festival, Ra, by then the sun god of Upper Egypt, created her from a fiery eye gained from his mother, to destroy mortals who conspired against him. In the myth, Sekhmet's bloodlust was not quelled at the end of the battle and led to her destroying almost all of humanity, so Ra had tricked her by turning the Nile as red as blood so that Sekhmet would drink it. The trick, however, was that the red liquid was not blood, but beer mixed with pomegranate juice so that it resembled blood, making her so drunk that she gave up slaughter and became an aspect of the gentle Hathor. The complex interweaving of deities occurred over the thousands of years of the culture, precinct of Montu. This portion of the site is dedicated to the son of Mut and Amun-Re, Montu, the war god of the Theban triad. It is located to the north of the Amun-Re complex and is much smaller in size. It is not open to the public. Temple of Amenhotep IV. The temple that Akhenaten constructed on the site was located east of the main complex, outside the walls of the Amun-Re precinct. It was destroyed immediately after the death of its builder, who had attempted to overcome the powerful priesthood who had gained control over Egypt before his reign. It was so thoroughly demolished that its full extent and layout is currently unknown. The priesthood of that temple regained their powerful position as soon as Akhenaten died, and were instrumental in destroying many records of his existence.